Hello and welcome to Beyond the Capsule, the podcast brought to you to demystify the science on all things health and wellness. Designed by experts, created to empower you to live better and longer.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Capsule. I'm Jo, brand manager here at Cytoplan, and today we have a very, very special episode for you with a very special guest and an expert in the topic of children's nutrition and well-being. You may well know her. She's an award-winning nutritionist. She's a multi-best-selling author and someone you've probably seen on the TV and radio more recently. Her excellent books are helping parents feel more confident in feeding their families. It is, of course, the baby and child nutritionist, Charlotte Stirling-Reed. Hi, Charlotte.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. We're also really excited to be celebrating the recent launch of our new partnership with Charlotte, our children's vitamin drops, but more on that later. To begin with, Charlotte, hello again.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. So many people know you from your books and your incredible, very detailed social media posts and all the work that you put in to help families and children. What I want to do is take it back to the very beginning and understand where your passion first began or what got you into children's nutrition.
Yeah, well, it's actually a really good story. I grew up with two parents who cared a huge amount about food and nutrition. So they were always cooking around me. They loved food. We had dinner parties. You know, my mum really cared about health as well. She didn't always get it right, let's just say, but she was really interested in health and nutrition. She wanted to feed us well. You know, we had really good food. We had really varied food. We ate lots and lots of plants. And I think this was back in the time when it was less, you know, it's really popular now, but it was back in the time when it wasn't so popular. So I had a real interest in food and nutrition from that. And I think also my dad's a scientist and I was actually really good at science at school and I loved science. And when I went to university, you know, trying to figure out what you want to do. But I remember thinking, do you know what would be really great is learning more about nutrition. So when I went to uni, I did nutrition and human biology as a degree. So I was kind of marrying two really important aspects of my life together. And I loved it. I mean, I loved the science and I really find human biology fascinating. But also the nutrition element was really fascinating too, because it was very new then. I mean, there were people talking about it in the media and there was a few TV programs about it, but it wasn't a huge amount. And so I really have to say that I loved, you know, marrying the two together and coming out of university with that knowledge. Yeah, so I really just love marrying the two, the science and the nutrition. And I feel like it was been an incredibly good time throughout my career to talk about nutrition because nutrition is in the news every single day now. You know, it's really popular. So I'm glad I did it, basically.
Yeah, I bet. And it's such a confusing world for parents, I bet, as well. And so much of your time is spent answering all those parents' questions and things. What's one of the most popular questions you get or the most common problem perhaps parents face these days?
Yeah, I guess, you know, one of the main things is going to be around that kind of typical fussy toddler year, the years of food refusal, you know, making something, putting it on the table and a child refusing it. I mean, parents, first of all, they massively blame themselves. There's so much guilt around parenting. And I think there's a lot of trying to get it right, which we can't always do. You know, there's no perfection in any of the parenting, including with how we feed them and what we feed them. So I think for me, it's very much about that. You know, that is one of the most common things. How do I get my child to eat X and Y and Z? And I think I spend a lot of my days trying to reassure parents that actually this is very, very normal. Children refuse food. They go through a phase called neophobia, which is actually very common. And we think it's an evolutionary thing where children just become a bit wary about what they put in their mouth, which makes sense. You know, when they start to move around a little bit more, they get a bit more wary about what they're eating. And it really does make sense. But the society we live in now, you know, as parents, we're giving our kids safe foods to eat. So when they're not eating it, it just leads to frustration. And so for me, it's reassuring parents that it's normal. And then it's giving them the kind of tips and support to tackle it with patience and, you know, without driving ourselves mad and without resorting to some of the tactics that actually make it worse. So I think that's definitely one of the main ones. I mean, there's lots of others, but that's probably the main one that comes up every single day, I would say, in my world. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Because it's challenging, isn't it? I suppose if a child pushes away their plate of food, what does a parent do in that situation at dinner time? Because it's a stressful time, I suppose, for everyone involved, isn't it?
And also as parents, our response, our very natural, innate response is we need to get them to eat. So it's like, well, what tactic can I employ right now to get them to eat this food? Because I know they need to for survival. But actually sometimes that kind of innate need to get them to eat has really negative repercussions. It might be that we're forcing them. We might get angry at the table. We might pressurize them to eat. We might try tactics to coax them into eating. And all of those things actually have, the opposite effect to what we want. But obviously as parents, we're just going, no, I need my child to survive. So we're actually doing something very natural and very normal, but it actually can be really counterintuitive to getting them to want to eat that food in the long run. So I do a lot of trying to explain that to parents in a really non-judgmental way. And I think that's so important in parenting, because I'm a parent myself, and the judgment we put upon ourselves is bad enough without other people judging us. So for me, that is really critical, to go in there with a lens and an eye that is very much non-judgmental.
I suppose there's a lot of pressure for it to be perfect, isn't there? And for where parents begin, and your obviously resources and your books are a great place to start, I suppose, for that, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I've got so much. I mean, I've spent the last 12, probably more than that now, years of my life, quite literally writing blogs, writing content. My books are available. I've got courses available. So I've got a huge amount of material that is available that can support parents through it. And what I try and do is translate the science and the research and what that says. And I try and put it into practical, understandable, relatable advice that parents can take away with them, and actually that's tangible. They can actually make a difference. So, yeah.
So when I speak to parents or friends who have got young children at the moment, as I said, it can feel so overwhelming and they don't know where to begin. There's so many do's and don'ts. Do you have any hacks for getting more fruit and veg into children's meals? I suppose there's the whole hiding tactic and getting it sneakily into sauces and stuff. How have you approached that, maybe with your own children or advising others?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is with my own children, and I think this is almost like, it's hard to talk about, because I don't want to say, I did it brilliantly, guys, just copy me. But actually what I have done with my children, they love fruit and veg, both of them. I'm not saying they don't refuse meals. Often they do, quite often they will be like, I don't like that, I don't want that, or just eat very little. That's really normal. But one thing they don't often do is refuse fruit or veg. And the reason for that, it is very, very, very familiar in our house. Fruit and veg is always on our plate. It's always in abundance. We have it for breakfast, we have it for lunch, we have it for dinner, we have it with snacks. It is the norm. And one of the things I talk about in my work is something called familiarity. So it's basically building up familiarity with foods, because children like what is familiar. So if a massive array of fruit and veg being part of every meal is the normal for your children, it will maintain and stay being the normal. And I'm not going to say they won't go through phases where they refuse it, because again, my daughter didn't eat broccoli for about a year and a half, but now wouldn't even question it if I put it on her plate. It's all about building familiarity. Once they're familiar with something, they're much more likely to accept it. And once they accept something and they eat it, their taste buds are much more likely to also adapt to enjoy that taste and flavor. It becomes the norm. So for me, it's about familiarization and getting them to like it. So that's the first thing I would say. But other things that you can do, so like I said, make them familiar, cook with it. Don't take it off the plate when it's refused, because children often go through periods. I mean, if I took off the plate all of the foods that my children have both not liked throughout their lives, and they are 8 and 5 now, we would almost have nothing to eat. It's definitely been, my daughter wouldn't eat egg or avocado or broccoli or couscous. They've been through phases where neither of them like apples or bananas. We've so many phases. But what I've done is I've never gone, okay, you don't like that now, I'm not going to offer it anymore. I've constantly offered it. I've gone, okay, fine, don't eat it today. But it might be there tomorrow or in 3 days' time. It's never taken away. And I think a lot of parents go, oh, they don't like that, so I'm not offering it anymore, which makes sense, because you don't want to waste that food. But actually all that does is it stops their exposure to it. And so it makes it become more of a thing. So when you do introduce it again in 3 months' time, they're like, whoa, no. I haven't seen this for a while. I'm not eating it. I know I don't like it. And the other thing I would say is, Really key. Well, two other things, okay? Really key is non-pressured meal times. The meal time should not be about getting them to eat. The meal time should be about enjoyment. They should be about sitting together, the social occasion, exposing them to food so they see it, feel it, smell it, whatever. They don't have to eat it. It's about an enjoyable environment, coming together, having fun around food. And the final thing is really being a model, being a role model. It's all about that, do what I do, not what I say, eating with them, showing them that you enjoy this food, eating together, letting them see you eat it and it be normal for you is what is going to have the biggest knock-on effect to them eating it. Even if it's not right now, later on down the line, that's going to have a really big impact.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, that makes so much sense. It's making that dinner time enjoyable and making
Yeah.
them part of it, I suppose, as
completely.
well. Like, do you involve your children in the cooking and the preparation of it all as well? I would assume that would help.
Yeah, definitely. The more you can get children involved in food, even like I say, it doesn't have to be eating it. It might be reading about it. It might be, talking about it. It might be cooking with it. It might be prepping with it. It might be giving it a stir. It might be grating something on top. All those tiny little things. They seem like they don't mean anything, but actually any time you can get them involved with food and learning about food and appreciating food, it's going to make a big difference. So, and I always say, to get children to enjoy food and accept food, they don't have to eat it. Mm-hmm. They can, experience it in multiple other ways. And if you can get kids cooking, please do. It's messy, it's chaotic. You often end up with nothing to eat because, it's been a total disaster, but actually they learn a lot from it. So I do that. And I'm planning on, at the moment, I don't have a kitchen, but I am planning on doing it and doing it much more when we have got our nice big open plan kitchen. That's the aim.
It'll be worth the wait.
It will.
So how can people balance, I suppose, being food first while recognising sort of modern dietary nutrition gaps is what we sort of refer to it here at Cytoplan. Because there's a place for supplements, isn't there, when where needed, but it's always, I suppose, a food first approach.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a massive advocate of it's always going to be a food first approach. You can't replicate or replace a balanced diet. You just can't. Food is so important. It is our fuel. It provides us the nutrients. It provides us with the fiber that we need, the protein, the energy. It is so vital. And, for young children, there's a concept called the first 1,000 days of life, which is all about kind of laying the foundations of children's future health. And food is such an important part of that. It's why I talk a lot about feeding children in the early years and the foods they have at nursery and weaning and the foods that we introduce at the very, very, very start of kids eating. It all matters so much for the development of acceptance and patterns of eating, but also, like I said, for those building blocks of their nutrition. So yes, you cannot get away. Food is so important, but there are some nutrients that might need to be supplemented in the diet. For example, in the UK, we recommend vitamins A, C, and D as a standard for children when they are 6 months of age or when they're having less than 500 mils of formula. We recommend that as a safeguard to kind of mitigate against deficiencies. Of course, as well, not all the time can children have a perfectly balanced diet. It's not possible. They go through periods of illnesses. As we've already talked about, they go through periods of fussy eating and food refusal. They might have, allergies, or they might have to have diets where they restrict some food for a little bit of time if they're testing things out with a medical professional for some reason. So most of us don't have perfect diets every single day. And children's appetites are so fickle. They really are up and down. Like I already mentioned about neophobia and the fussy phases, but also children get sick a lot. There's often periods of illness. They might have periods of time where their appetite is just really low for whatever reason. So they might need topping up. And there's certain nutrients that they might need topping up on that are really vital for young children. So things like iron and B vitamins and foods like iodine, which can be a little bit harder to get, especially on some diets. So there are some nutrients that might need topping up in the diet. But as I said, it's never as a replacement to a balanced diet. That's always going to be number one. Mm-hmm. But having something that provides, especially with something like vitamin D, which we really cannot get from food alone, tend to get it largely from sunlight, sunlight. But for those of us like young children who don't tend to be exposed to the sun a lot, they need to get it from a supplement form. And for a nutrient like vitamin B12, for example, that cannot be gained if children or adults are eating a plant-based diet or a vegan diet, which excludes all animal products. So you would need to make sure you're getting that in supplement form. So there are some nutrients that are really, really important to make sure we're getting in there in case of deficiency. And then, I do recommend for young children a multivitamin for those who maybe, like I said, are not always having a balanced diet, who are fussy or going through periods of food refusal, if there's lots of illness, if there's restrictions, if they're cutting out whole food groups, for example, for whatever medical reason it might be. I would say in those kind of situations, a multivitamin can be a really useful resource for parents. But like I said, it's not first line. It's always going to have to come alongside or, slightly behind having that healthy, balanced and varied diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just completely aligns with everything that we chat about at Cytoplan as well. It's where our philosophy is built on.
Yeah.
But it also is a wonderful segue into our new range that we've co-formulated together. So today we are on our photo shoot for it ahead of the launch. And by the time this episode goes out, it'll be in everyone's hands and in their kitchen cupboards.
Yeah, exciting time.
So we had our first look at it today. Well, you did in particular. We've spent over 3 years now formulating this, bringing it all together.
Can't believe it.
How has that journey been for you?
It's been amazing. It was a real challenge. And I think like even when, you guys came to me and suggested it, and I remember saying at the time, well, yeah, but it's going to have to be like, it's going to have to tick all my boxes. And then even in the development phase, I knew that was always going to be really tricky. Like, how can we do all of this? How can we meet all of this criteria? And I did have quite a strict criteria. And I remember your team at some point saying to me like, well, we'll try. But we did it. And I'm really pleased. I'm so thrilled with the range. And I feel like, we've got a variety there's a range of 3 different sets of drops for different children, different occasions and different needs. And yeah, I'm just really thrilled with it. And I just really hope that parents are going to also love it too for their little ones.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they already do because it'll already be in their cupboards.
It'll be out.
So should we just chat quickly about that little range that we've put together? Yep. So it sort of follows from birth up to 5 years, isn't it? So vitamin D, A, C and D, and then the multivitamins.
Yep. Exactly that. So the vitamin D is the option which is for children from birth or from when they're having less than 500 mils of formula. The reason for that is just simply because it's already added in the formula, so you don't need it for those children. But vitamin D is really, an important nutrient. It's recommended by the government to be supplemented to all children. And for that reason, we've made sure that we put the right amount of vitamin D in. So we've got 10 micrograms so that it actually can be given right up until a child's 5th birthday. They can have the 10 micrograms of vitamin D every day. It's flavorless. It's got a little bit of avocado oil that helps it to be fat and help with absorption of it. And I'm really proud of it. It's really great. And like I said, right from birth, if children are being breastfed, it's a really, really great way to make sure they are getting the right amount of vitamin D in their diet. And as I said, it can be given up till children are 5. Then the second product we've got is the vitamin A, C, D. Again, this is government recommended amounts. Vitamin A and vitamin C, in some population groups, they can be lower in the diet. So it's to try and make sure that we are topping up on those levels of nutrients that can be lower in children's diet. So we've got the ACD range for those parents who want to just tick off the kind of government recommended supplement amounts. Now, the ACD is from 6 months of age. And again, it's the same thing. It's 6 months for a breastfed baby or from when a child is having less than 500 mils of formula milk. And it's a really good option. It has like a slightly sweeter taste, but there's no added sugar and there is no added sweeteners in it or anything. But it does have a slightly sweeter taste just because of the components that are in it. But it's bioeffective and it's a really, really great option that many young children will have. And for many parents, if they want to, that can be all that is needed. However, we've created product 3. which is a multivitamin and multi-mineral. Now, this one was definitely the challenging one when we were putting it together. Now, this is for children from 1+ years of age, and it really contains doses of some of those nutrients that are important for children when they're growing. And we've included it in low levels because we've made sure that we're basing it on children's dietary requirements rather than what a lot of the products on the supermarket shelves do, is because legally on the back of the pack, they have to have adult requirements, and the percentage next to the NRV is for adults. So what I wanted to do was step right back and go, well, yeah, that's fair enough that we've got to put that on the label, but what do children actually need? And we went right back to the scratch. We looked at the reference nutrient intakes for young children, and then we developed a product that was more in line with that, so that it is specifically for children. And I went to town on like really checking what nutrients would be most beneficial to put in. Every single nutrient and every single ingredient that is in those the multivitamin has been put there for a reason, and there's a very good rationale behind it, which is something that was really important to me. I didn't want there to be fillers and compounds in there that had no place being in a child's multivitamin. So everything in there has been thoroughly thought out and investigated and checked, and we know it's safe, it's within all great levels, but it's also within an amount that is also going to have an effect. And again, just to really reiterate and highlight, this is to complement a healthy, balanced diet. It's not as a replacement. It's not going to cover your child for everything if they're not getting any nutrients in their diet. It's a top up. It's to help complement that balanced diet, to help top up on the nutrients that are likely to be important for young children. So yeah, I again, really proud of it. The multivitamin was definitely the hardest one to create because it was really hard to do that without adding sugars and fillers and sweeteners. It's definitely got a flavour because we've added iron in, but I was absolutely adamant that I wanted some iron to go into this vitamin and mineral. And the reason for that is because iron's a really important nutrient for young children. And it's one of the ones that we often look at when we're talking about weaning and introducing foods into the diet. We look at iron, and iron stores can be lower in young children. So it was so vital for me to put that in. And actually, it's not in that many multivitamins that are on the supermarket shelves. But again, for me, it was a really important component, and I did not want to compromise on not putting iron in. So it does have a stronger flavour, and it does have a stronger taste. But the best thing about all these vitamin drops is they are easy to implement, so you can pop them under tongue straight away. My children love having the drops in their mouth. They're really used to it. They're really familiar. The multivitamin, they actually ask me for it. They'll go and collect the bottle themselves and be like, can you pop this? Can we have this? You can add it to their food, or like today we've been adding it into drinks, and you cannot taste it in any milk as well. So it's a really, really great option, and it's so versatile in terms of how you use it. And again, with the whole range, it's versatile. You can dip in and out. You can choose which ones you want. I wouldn't recommend taking them all at the same time. It's best to just stick with one and have that as your vitamin, for whatever period of time you feel like you need it. But the multivitamin is definitely one there as a top up for any children who feel like they need a little, or for any parents who feel like their little ones need a little bit more, or they're worried about their diet. So yeah.
Excellent. I can feel your excitement coming through. And your kids have been lucky enough to test all of the different prototypes. It's probably
they
the best
have
phrase
had.
for
We
it.
had so many at one point, like ching ching ching, like all the bottles like chinging together. But yeah, we've had so many. My kids have been having it for over 2 years because like I said, we've been testing this. So we've been doing different samples and different variations for about 3 years. And yeah, they genuinely love them, and they ask for them. And I mean, I've been largely giving them the multivitamin one. My kids do have a well-balanced diet. We don't have meat in the diet. We're largely kind of plant-based / a bit of pescatarian in there. So because of that, I do try and give them the multivitamin on the regular. And like I say, they love it. It's a safeguard. It's a top up. And it gives me a little bit of confidence that I know they've had that in the morning as well.
Yeah, amazing. And all those points you mentioned about being sweetener free and no additives and things like that really helps it stand out from everything else that's on the market, I suppose.
Definitely.
And over the last 3 years, you've not taken it lightly, working with our team and things. What have you learned on that journey from our nutrition team?
I learned that it was very hard, and I learned that my requests were challenging. When you look at the supermarket shelves, you can see like such a wide array. There's loads of gummies out there. There's loads of supplements that are not really appropriate for young children, especially babies. babies, some of them are from 1 year of age and you kind of expect them to swallow a capsule. That is never going to happen. Some of them are gummies that kind of get stuck in their teeth, or that they might think of sweets. So if they're accidentally left around with them, they're going to be ingested, and that's not good either. Some of them are choking hazards. A lot of them don't contain the right balance of nutrients. And I think a lot of them, like I mentioned as well, they kind of want to have that percentage on the back of the pack, which is the nutrient reference value, the NRV. They want to see that's really high. So a lot of them put that in adult levels almost into children's products. So we haven't done that. We've made sure that we change it. And that was all so much learning. And also the legality of the kinds of things you need to put on the pack. So for example, we have to put the scientific name of those vitamins and minerals. And I was really worried about that, bamboozling parents and then picking it up and thinking, I don't know what any of this is. And so I was really adamant that what we were going to do on those packs is to make sure that we name and label every single one of those nutrients, so that if a parent picks something up and it has a really complicated scientific name, right next to that it says vitamin B12 or iron or a source of iodine. So you can literally see what every single ingredient, especially in those kind of multivitamin and mineral drops, is. It was really about, I think what I learned massively was just how complicated this field is, how overwhelming it is. And I understand why it's overwhelming. There's a reason it's taken us 3 years to get this product right. And that's because it really isn't easy to create. It's not easy to get the balance right. It's not easy to get it to taste okay when it has things like iron in it. There's a rationale behind every single thing we've done. And I think that, I've learned a lot about that. I've also learned that iron tastes quite strong.
Yeah,
so we've got, I actually really like the flavour of it, and my kids do as well. And I think a lot of that will be getting kids used to it from a young age. But like I said, you can add it and mix it into food. You can add it and mix it into drinks. But the multivitamin does have a flavour. The other two, like I said, they're ACD sweeter. The avocado doesn't taste at all with the the vitamin D with the avocado oil doesn't taste at all. So, like I said, there's a real range, and there is really something for everyone that we've got there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've tasted it ourselves today in milk, in oats, absolutely fine.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If we can handle it, I'm sure they absolutely can as well.
Exactly.
So why did you choose Cytoplan to work with for our collaboration?
Well, I think, I was got in touch with by a member of your team who is amazing, who talked to me a lot about like the brand ethos and the products that you have. And, a part of it was like your kind of understanding of like what I needed to create. But I was actually also blown away by some of your team and the depth of research they went into around the kind of forms of different supplements, the knowledge that they had on the different forms and how they, how some are more effective than others. I think a lot of people don't know that when you've put together a vitamin or a mineral, that actually that detail matters. There's different forms of different nutrients. And actually, as someone who's never worked with supplements before, I didn't have that knowledge. And it was really, really nice for me to be partnered with you guys who had that real depth of knowledge. This form is going to work best for X, Y, and Z, And even things like, for example, in the multivitamin and mineral compound, we've put copper in. Now, that copper isn't in there because young children need copper necessarily. That's in there to try and balance out the level of zinc that we've included. And it's just things like that, like the micro knowledge that you guys had around the forms of the vitamins and the minerals that we use, and the rationale for using them was just gold dust. And I loved learning it, and it really informed the creation of the entire supplement. And I think that was really important to me. And also I've been experimenting and testing out some of your other products. Like my dad's using quite a lot of your Cytoplan range. And like I say, my kids have tried a few of the other kids' multivitamins and minerals that you've had prior to these ones being developed. So they've explored some of your range as well. And I think, my whole family are loving the old Cytoplan team now as well. So feel like part of the family. And I just, like I say, I was really, really blown away by the depth of knowledge, the research. And a lot of the knowledge was just like off the cuff. You'd be like, that's because of this. And I was like, wow, teach me more. And I love learning. And I feel like I really learned a lot on this journey of creating the supplement. So that's why I worked with you guys.
Excellent. Yeah, the nutrition team really have the minds of geniuses at times. It feels when we're talking to them. And it's having those appropriate levels of the right nutrients, which forms our bioeffective message, really, so they're properly absorbed by the body. They go exactly where they're needed most. And they're exactly what the body needs to sort of thrive. So it's been an excellent journey to sort of partner with you. So,
and thank you for having me along for it.
As we perhaps look towards the future of nutrition, are there any trends now that you think are a bit of a fad or might pass through, or any kind of trends you can see on the horizon when it comes to children's health?
Well, yeah, actually, two things I think. So fad-wise, first of all, protein is massive at the moment. And obviously protein is incredibly important. But I mean, children get more than enough protein from their everyday diet. So for me, that's one thing that I think there's a real craze of protein at the moment, but actually most of us get more than enough, and children get loads in their day-to-day diet without even thinking about it. So many of the foods you give your children will have protein in them. So I would say don't worry about that. I think there's definitely a bit of a rise in like plant-based, vegetarian, vegan, flexitarian, pescatarian children, which is great. A lot more people thinking about the planet, thinking about what they're choosing to eat, choosing the right types of things like meats and fish as well. And I think I'm really pleased to see that people paying a bit more attention to what they are having. There's a massive trend of carnivore at the moment, and a lot of people who are recommending that young children are kind of raised on this really meat-heavy diet. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's like ancestry diet or something, but there really is no evidence for it. And actually, a lot of the kind of grounding that people use to say why it's beneficial, if you actually go back and you look at the data and you look at the research, there actually isn't any data that points to this being a good thing. And the other thing that I think is going to be a trend, which comes off the back of that, is fiber. There's so much more conversation about fiber now. I've been working in this field for years, 15 years. And ever since the start, it's always been fiber's going to be the next big thing. Fiber's going to be the next big thing. But we've actually got some really great gut health dietitians and conversation coming out now about fiber. I've got a colleague who's got a book coming out on fiber next month. It's a really, really important topic. And I think for years, young children have been, or parents have almost been kind of raising kids and a bit scared of giving them fiber. And actually, young children do need fiber. A lot of them don't get enough fiber in their diet. A lot of us as adults don't get enough fiber in our diet. So for me, fiber is a really big one. I want to see more people talking about. I want to see more people offering a variety of beans and lentils and pulses and plant-based foods during that weaning stage to get kids familiar with it. So when they're older, they're more likely to accept those foods. But fiber. Forget about the ancestry diet. Protein, fine, but don't go out too much on it. Those are some of the kind of really key things. And the other thing is children's gut health. I think there's a massive, we're learning so much more about children's gut health. And I think we will in the next 10, 15 years, I think we'll really uncover so much more about raising kids with healthy guts. And fiber is going to play a massive part in that as well.
Yeah, so, amazing. You see it in the news all the time. Yes. And in all the articles, everyone's talking about fibre at the moment.
It's massive right now.
Watch this space.
Exactly.
We shall see. And so what do you think is one small lifestyle habit that parents could perhaps implement for their little ones from today, if it was just one little thing?
I think, one of the things I always like to do is I love to talk about what you can add to children's food. Okay, so just as an example, when you were making their porridge, and again, I remember this takes me back to the weaning days when I was weaning my kids, when they're making porridge, what can I add to that? When I'm making their lunch, what can I whack on the side that's going to add more? When I'm making their dinner, what can I stir into this to add more? There is so much you can do to add more. It doesn't have to cost money, okay? It doesn't have to take you loads of extra time. It doesn't have to be something you have to really prep or need skill to do. So just as an example, porridge, you could get some milled seeds and you can get them from the supermarkets like Aldi or Lidl or Asda. Packets of milled seeds don't cost a huge amount. You don't need to use a huge amount, and you can sprinkle them onto children's cereal. That helps to add extra things like omega-3 and vitamins and minerals and a little bit of fiber in there as well. Lunchtime. You could, for example, offer an extra side of frozen veggies, for example, on the side. So steam up some frozen veggies and offer them on the side of whatever else you're offering for lunch. dinner, you could quite literally throw in a tin of lentils. So tin of lentils or half a tin of lentils if you guys are not used to it. Throw that into whatever meal. If you're making a spaghetti bolognese or a stew or a soup or a curry, throw in the lentils. You will barely even notice it, and you'll be upping your fibre, you'll be upping your iron, you'll be upping vitamins and minerals in your food. It's a no-brainer, and that doesn't have to cost a huge amount of money. Lentils are really cheap. Frozen veggies are really cheap. They're always in my freezer. And like I said, something like milled seeds, or if you don't want to go to that, you could do something like make sure you're always stirring in a piece of fruit, or again, some frozen berries that you could stir into that porridge instead. So it's really, and I know that's not a simple answer and you wanted a quick, simple answer, but it's really about thinking, what can I add to this? What can I add? Every time you create a meal or a snack for your child, think, what can I add to it? And if you go to the freezer and you go, oh, look, here's some leftover spinach. Let me just chop that up. Let me just dice that up and throw it in. What could you add to this meal? And that is a really great way of adding more without any effort.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Excellent. And it's such a simple ad. And we were talking before off camera about, the 3 things parents need, one of them being simplicity, wasn't it? Which is kind of where the range came from. And again, it applies to the diet as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Transparency, simplicity, and
clarity.
Yeah,
exactly. They're different things as well.
Different things. So obviously a balanced diet is number 1. And supplements can obviously support a balanced diet and help bridge any little nutrition gaps. What's your stand on treats? Because obviously grandparents like to treat the little ones. Parents obviously like to treat the little ones. I'm an auntie. I like to treat the little ones. So what's your standpoint on that, and where do they fit in a diet?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I try not to label them as treats, because as soon as you call something a treat, you're saying that is better than the alternative. So if you're calling something a treat, you're calling something else less good, basically. You're also putting those kind of foods on a pedestal. So in our house, we don't call them treats. We just call them what they are: chocolate, or sweets, or crisps, or cake, or whatever it is. We don't call them treats. And I think that's a really, really key message from a young age, trying to get children away from this hierarchy of like, this food is the best. In society, we always value those kind of foods over others. So Christmas, Easter, birthday parties, when the kids have birthdays at school, the foods that they get are always sweets or chocolates or crisps. It's going to be that way. And I'm not saying that we can change society right now. That's not going to happen. But what we can do is change how we talk about those kind of foods in the home. So like I say, labeling foods as what they are. That's broccoli. That's a quiche. That's cake. Not one of those is valued above another. Now, again, I'm not saying children are born with a preference for sweeter food. So children actually are born to prefer sweet foods. So I'm not saying that they aren't going to desire those over them, but we can help by not reinforcing that. So by not bringing them out and saying, here's your pudding, make sure you finish that first and then you can have your pudding. Because again, all we're doing is glorifying those foods. We're saying, eat through that stuff and then you can have the great stuff at the end. If we do that from the start of a child's journey with food, again, their desire, their hit point, their ding is that treat food. So I try and talk about having foods on level playing food. Sometimes I might feel like having a sandwich. Sometimes I might feel like having a load of veggies. Sometimes I might be like, oh, I fancy a curry, and other times I'll be like, oh yeah, look at those biscuits. I'd love those, And of course, as humans, we are trained to enjoy some of those foods more than others. But it doesn't mean that at different times of the day, I don't have different appetites for different foods. And that's what I really seriously try and encourage my kids and other parents who are raising kids to do the same. Keep them on a level playing field as long as possible. Don't have a food hierarchy where you say some are better than the others. Talk about how sometimes I really enjoy eating this and sometimes I enjoy eating this. If I'm sitting down for a meal, I'm not thinking, oh, I really want some cake. I'm thinking, oh, I'm really hungry for this meal. Earlier on I had a wrap, a warm halloumi wrap, and I was so excited to eat that food. And for me, it's about trying to encourage children to be excited about all foods. If we are constantly going on and saying, oh, if you have that, you can have a treat, or if we're saying, if you eat that, you can get your pudding, all we're doing is making them desire those foods and not a massive amount of delicious and nutritious and, satiating and warming and, gorgeous food that is around us. So for me, it's about the level playing field as long as possible, keeping it all not referring to things as treats. And of course, it's fine for them to be part of their diet. Restricting, it's going to have the opposite effect. If you say, no, you are never allowed these chocolate buttons, then they're going to want the chocolate buttons. So it's about encompassing it, the way that you react to it, having it in your diet and showing that moderation is normal and that sometimes we like some food and sometimes we like other food. And I think it's really hard, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is not the norm, and it is not easy. And it's not easy for me to do, because it's really hard when someone brings home, a massive pack of Haribo and you're like, oh my God, please don't have it before your dinner. But it's about, trying to kind of navigate that a little bit, which is challenging. Not restrict, model, balance, and talk about all foods being wonderful. And that's the way that I approach that in my family.
Excellent.
That was a nice short answer.
Yeah, I know.
Of course.
Wouldn't expect anything less, don't worry. Thank you so much for sharing everything today. It's been really, really insightful. If people want to find out more about you, where would they go? What books can they read?
Okay, so I've got a range of books. I've got 4 books. My first one, which is about weaning your baby, is called How to Wean Your Baby. I've got How to Feed Your Toddler, How to Feed Your Family. And then if you're after a cookbook, I've got a recipe book which has got 100 meal inspiration for baby and toddler, which is called The Ultimate Weaning and Toddler Cookbook. So those are my 4 books. And I've also got a website, which is www.srnutrition.co.uk. And I tell you, the wealth of information on there. I have been writing on there for probably about 12 years, again, maybe longer. And I pretty much blog every single week. So the amount of content on there is huge. I also have free fact sheets on there. So you can download fact sheets called All About Milk, or Help My Child's a Fussy Eater, or, even things like trackers to help you get on top of your child nutrition, things about food safety. I've got so many of those. And I also have courses on fussy eating and also weaning. So if any of that kind of you want to know more, please do check it out. I'd be really happy to help. Oh, and lastly, I've got an Instagram, which is at @SR_nutrition. And I share an awful lot of information, as you know, on there.
Absolutely do. You are so helpful in the comments to pretty much anyone that comments. You'll go into the detail, you'll look into the research. You're always so happy to help.
Do try.
And of course, now our brand new range that we've created together will be so out. Excited.
And thank you for having me, and thank you for being patient with me, and thank you for helping me create something that we're both really, really proud of.
Oh, it's been excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Beyond the Capsule. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If this conversation has sparked any thoughts or questions and you'd like to learn more, don't hesitate to get in touch with our nutritional therapists at nutrition@cytoplan.co.uk. We're Cytoplan, inspired by nature, proven by science, and driven by purpose.